On my 45th birthday, my wife's lawyer served me papers at work. She gets everything, including full custody, he gloated. Your children don't even want your name anymore. I smiled and handed him a sealed envelope. Deliver this to your client. By evening, my phone exploded, her mother crying. How could you know our 25-year-old's secret? You know what's funny about turning 45? Everyone tells you it's supposed to be this milestone moment, like you've officially crossed into the distinguished gentleman phase of life, where you start wearing reading glasses on a chain and complaining about music being too loud. Well, let me tell you something about milestones. Sometimes they're less like celebration markers and more like tombstones for the life you thought you had. And my 45th birthday, that sucker was about to become the gravestone for my entire marriage, complete with a sleazy eulogy delivered by a guy who looked like he bought his law degree from a vending machine. I was sitting in my office at Sterling Risk Consulting, which sounds way fancier than it actually is, though I'll admit the view isn't half bad. 18th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown. The kind of setup that makes clients think you're successful enough to solve their problems. The irony, of course, is that I spend my days helping Fortune 500 companies figure out who's stabbing them in the back, tracking down corporate leaks and insider threats like some kind of white-collar detective. And yet, I apparently missed the biggest betrayal happening right under my own roof. But we'll get to that part later, because right now I'm mid-sip of my overpriced Starbucks Grande Americano, 2 shots of espresso, because apparently regular coffee isn't complicated enough anymore, when this guy walks in wearing what I can only describe as the world's saddest attempt at professional attire. The suit was off the rack from somewhere that rhymes with Men's Warehouse, probably cost him about $150, and the tie? Oh man, the tie looked like it had been attacked by a printer running out of ink. But it was his face that really sold the whole package. This smug little smirk that told me he thought he was about to ruin my entire day, and he was absolutely loving every second of it. He walked in like he owned the place, like he'd rehearsed this moment in front of his bathroom mirror while pointing finger guns at his reflection. And I already knew whatever was coming out of his mouth was going to be premium-grade nonsense. "Mr. Sterling," he said, and even the way he said my name had this theatrical quality to it, like he was announcing the defendant at a murder trial. I sat down my coffee, which was already getting cold, because apparently the laws of thermodynamics don't care about your dramatic moments, and looked at him with the kind of blank expression I've perfected over years of dealing with people who think they're smarter than me. "Yes, happy birthday," he said. And that smirk got wider, which I didn't think was physically possible without his face cracking in half. Then he reached into his discount briefcase and pulled out this thick manila envelope, the kind they use in movies when someone's getting served papers or inheriting a haunted mansion. He slid it across my desk with the kind of flourish that suggested he'd been practicing that move too, probably in the same bathroom mirror session with the finger guns. "Your wife is filing for divorce." Now, here's the thing about working in corporate intelligence for over a decade. You learn to control your reactions. You learn that the person who panics first loses, and the person who shows emotion is the person who gets played. So instead of doing what any normal human being might do, like, I don't know, showing surprise or anger or literally any emotion at all, I just sat there, hands folded on my desk, and let him continue his little performance. "She's taking the house, the cars, and full custody," he continued, clearly enjoying himself way too much. He was ticking items off like he was reading a shopping list at the world's worst grocery store. "Also," and this is where he paused for dramatic effect, because apparently this guy moonlights in community theater, "your children don't even want your name anymore." That last part was supposed to be the kill shot. I could tell that was supposed to be the moment where I crumbled, where the successful businessman facade cracked and revealed the broken man underneath. He probably expected tears or begging or maybe some kind of desperate plea negotiation right there on the spot. He wanted to see me suffer. And honestly, I couldn't even blame him for that. Lawyers get paid to destroy people, and he was probably getting a nice little bonus for delivering this particular package of misery on my birthday of all days. The timing was chef's kiss level petty, and I had to respect the commitment to maximum emotional damage. But here's what Discount James Bond didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, because people like him never bother to do their homework beyond whatever their clients tell them. I've been preparing for this conversation for 6 months. 6 months! While my wife thought she was being clever, sneaking around, deleting text messages, and meeting her business partner at hotels that charge by the hour, I was doing what I do best: documenting everything, building my case, and preparing for the inevitable war that was about to kick off. So instead of breaking down, instead of giving him the satisfaction he so desperately craved, I smiled. Not a big smile, nothing crazy, just this small, calm smile that probably confused the hell out of him. Then I opened my desk drawer, the bottom left one that I keep locked specifically for occasions like this, and pulled out my own envelope. Smaller than his, sealed with actual wax, because I'm petty like that, and definitely heavier, because the contents weren't just paper. They were pure, concentrated truth bombs waiting to explode.
"Cute," I said, keeping my voice level and relaxed, like we were discussing the weather or comparing notes on Netflix shows. "You deliver that speech well. Probably practiced it in the car on the way over, didn't you?" I stood up, walked around my desk, and handed him the envelope. "Here's the thing, though. I need you to deliver this to your client today, as soon as possible. Actually, consider it my birthday gift to her." He took the envelope, and I could see the confusion starting to crack through that smug exterior. He was holding it like it might bite him, turning it over in his hands, like maybe if he looked at it from the right angle, he'd understand what was happening. But he didn't understand, because people like him never understand until it's way too late. "What is this?" he asked, and now the confidence was wavering just a little bit. "Just some light reading," I said, walking back to my chair and picking up my coffee, which was definitely cold now. But I took a sip anyway, because power moves aren't about comfort, they're about sending messages. Family history, you might say. Old stories, buried secrets, that kind of thing. You know how it is. Every family has skeletons in their closet. Some families just have more interesting skeletons than others. He left after that, still looking confused, but also starting to look worried, which was exactly the vibe I was going for. I watched him walk out through my glass office walls, watched him get into his sad little sedan that probably had more than 100,000 miles on it. And then I sat back down and did something I'd been waiting to do for a very long time. I finished my cold coffee and started the countdown. The rest of the afternoon passed like any other Wednesday, which was wild considering my personal life was currently exploding like a soap opera written by someone who got paid by the twist. I had meetings, conference calls, reviewed some client files, and pretended that my phone wasn't about to become the center of a Category 5 storm. Around 3 o'clock, my assistant Emily brought in a birthday cupcake with a single candle, because she's thoughtful like that, and I blew it out while making a wish that was definitely about to come true. By 6 p.m., exactly when I predicted, because I'm good at my job and understand how information flows, my phone started ringing. And not just regular ringing, I'm talking nuclear meltdown-level communication chaos. First, it was Sophia, my soon-to-be ex-wife, calling from 4 different numbers because I'd blocked the first 3. Then it was her lawyer, Mr. Discount Suit himself, probably panicking because he'd just realized he'd walked into a trap. Then came the calls I'd really been waiting for. Senator Robert Vance, my father-in-law, voice tight with barely controlled rage. And Judge Eleanor Vance, my mother-in-law, who went straight past rage and landed directly on sobbing. "How could you know our 25-year-old secret?" she wailed through the phone. And I could hear her husband in the background trying to damage control, probably calculating how quickly they could make this whole thing disappear, the same way they'd made that other thing disappear 2.5 decades ago.
I put the phone on speaker, poured myself 2 fingers of the good whiskey I keep in my bottom desk drawer for special occasions, and leaned back in my chair, feet up on the desk like some kind of noir detective who just cracked the case of the century. "Happy birthday to me," I said to absolutely no one, raising my glass to my reflection in the darkening window. Outside, the city lights were starting to twinkle on. And somewhere out there, the Vance family dynasty was realizing that you can't bury the past forever, especially when you mess with someone who literally gets paid to dig up buried information. I took a slow sip of whiskey, let it burn down my throat in that satisfying way expensive liquor does, and whispered to myself with the kind of satisfaction that comes from knowing you've just won a game that the other players didn't even know they were playing. Checkmate. All right, so now that we've established that my birthday turned into what can only be described as a legal nuclear war with a side of family drama, I should probably introduce myself properly, because if you're going to watch someone's life implode in spectacular fashion, you should at least know whose life you're watching burn. My name is Daniel Sterling, and as of today, this blessed, cursed, absolutely insane Wednesday in October, I'm officially 45 years old, which means I'm at that age where I'm supposed to be having a midlife crisis involving a sports car and questionable facial hair choices. But instead, I'm having what I like to call a midlife reckoning, which is basically a crisis, except everyone else is the one panicking. I'm the founder and CEO of Sterling Risk Consulting, which sounds like one of those vague corporate names that could mean literally anything. And honestly, that's kind of the point. We're a corporate investigation firm, the kind of outfit that Fortune 500 companies call when they've got a problem they can't solve with their regular security team and can't risk going public with. Someone's leaking trade secrets to competitors. Call Sterling. Suspicious insider trading patterns before major announcements. Sterling. An executive's personal assistant suddenly buying a beach house on a $50,000 salary. You guessed it, Sterling. We're basically the guys who show up when things have already gone wrong, and everyone's desperately trying to figure out who to fire and possibly prosecute. I built this company from nothing about 12 years ago, right after I left military intelligence, because apparently spending your 20s and early 30s learning how to track terrorist cells and decode enemy communications makes you weirdly qualified to catch white-collar criminals. The transition from military to civilian life is supposed to be hard, but for me, it was like switching from expert mode to easy mode. Corporate criminals are just so much sloppier than the people I used to chase. They think deleting an email actually deletes it. They use their birthdays as passwords, and they somehow believe that having an affair with their secretary in the same hotel every Tuesday won't establish a pattern. It's almost adorable, really, except when it's happening in your own marriage, and then it's just sad. Speaking of my marriage, let me introduce you to Sophia Vance Sterling, age 37, owner of more designer handbags than most department stores, and current holder of the title Woman Who Thought She Could Outsmart an Intelligence Professional. Sophia is, or I guess was, since we're doing the whole divorce thing now, my wife of 9 years. Though, if we're being technical, she stopped being my wife in any meaningful sense about 3 years ago, when she decided that our marriage vows had an expiration date, and hers had apparently gone bad like milk left out on the counter. She's beautiful, I'll give her that. The kind of beautiful that turns heads in restaurants and makes other women whisper in bathroom lines. 5'7", blonde hair that costs more than my car payments, and this smile that she deploys like a tactical weapon whenever she needs something. We met at a charity gala about 10 years ago. One of those black tie events where rich people pretend to care about poor people for 3 hours while drinking champagne that costs more than most people's monthly rent. I was there because one of my clients had dragged me along, and she was there because she was on the board of some foundation her mother ran, probably as a tax write-off. She approached me at the bar, which should have been my first red flag because confident, beautiful women don't usually approach me. I'm more of a quietly competent in the corner type, and told me she admired strong men who protect people. At the time, I thought she meant it. Turns out what she actually meant was men with money who won't ask too many questions. But hindsight is 20/20 and all that. Now, Sophia didn't come from nothing. She came from something. And that something is the Vance family, which in this city is basically political royalty, if political royalty was built on questionable ethics and strategic memory loss. Her father is Senator Robert Vance, currently serving his 4th term, representing our fine state, and consistently voting for whatever benefits him and his donor friends most. He's got that perfect politician look, all white teeth and firm handshakes, and absolutely zero genuine emotion behind his eyes. I've seen robots with more authentic human responses. Her mother is Judge Eleanor Vance, who sits on the state Supreme Court and has built her entire career on being tough on crime, which is hilarious considering the skeletons in her closet could fill their own cemetery. But we'll get to that later. The Vance family is the kind of family that gets streets named after them and has their portraits hanging in government buildings. The kind of family where everyone knows everyone and favors get traded like baseball cards. Sophia grew up in that world, where image is everything, and actual substance is optional, where problems get solved with phone calls to the right people, and money changes hands in ways that never quite make it into public records. She learned from the best how to smile for cameras, how to say absolutely nothing while using a lot of words, and how to make people feel important right before she uses them for whatever she needs. Drama doesn't just run in her bloodline, it practically has its own dedicated circulatory system. From our marriage came 2 kids. And this is the part that actually hurts, because Liam and Olivia are genuinely great children who got stuck in the middle of their parents' war. Liam just turned 8, and he's got this scary smart thing going on where he reads books about quantum physics for fun and asks questions that make his teachers nervous. Olivia is 6, and she's got her mother's looks, but I hope not her personality. Though at 6, it's hard to tell if someone's going to grow up to be a decent human or a narcissist. Right now, they're both convinced I'm the villain in this story because Mommy has been running a very effective propaganda campaign, telling them that Daddy is mean, and Daddy doesn't love them, and Daddy is the reason we can't be a happy family anymore. It's amazing how quickly kids will believe whatever the parent with primary custody tells them, especially when that parent knows exactly how to weaponize their emotions. But here's the thing about being trained in military intelligence. Here's what 12 years of tracking bad guys and uncovering conspiracies teaches you. When someone declares war on you, when someone decides that you're the enemy and they're going to destroy you, you don't panic, you don't freak out, you don't start making desperate moves. And you definitely don't show your hand until you've got all your pieces in position. No, what you do is something way more effective, something that most people never think to do because they're too busy reacting instead of planning. You document everything. Every text message, every phone call, every bank transaction, every suspicious late-night meeting, every time they say they're at yoga but their location shows them at a hotel downtown. You become a data collection machine, a human surveillance operation focused on one target. And you do it so quietly, so carefully, that they never even know they're being watched. You smile, you nod, you play the oblivious husband, and the whole time you're building a case that would make prosecutors jealous. Because that's what they don't teach you in marriage counseling. That's what the self-help books don't mention. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes commitment doesn't matter. And sometimes the person you trusted most in the world is the person who's going to betray you the worst. And when that happens, when you realize that the life you thought you had was actually just a performance put on for your benefit, you've got two choices. You can fall apart, play the victim, let them take everything while you cry about how unfair life is, or you can do what I did. You can prepare for war. Not the loud kind of war with yelling and throwing things and dramatic confrontations that end up on social media. No, the quiet kind, the strategic kind, the kind of war where you're 3 moves ahead and they don't even know the game has started. The kind where you let them think they're winning right up until the moment you flip the board and reveal that you've been playing a completely different game the entire time.
That's what the past 6 months have been for me. One long strategic preparation for this exact moment. This birthday ambush that Sophia thought was going to destroy me. She thought she had it all figured out, thought she timed it perfectly for maximum emotional damage, thought she'd finally get to trade in her disappointing husband for a newer model while taking half my assets and both my kids. What she didn't count on was that I'm really, really good at my job, and my job is finding out things people don't want found. She didn't count on the fact that spending 12 years in military intelligence makes you paranoid in all the right ways. And she definitely didn't count on me being petty enough to wait until she struck first just so I could hit back 10 times harder. So yeah, that's me, Daniel Sterling, 45 years old, corporate investigator, soon-to-be divorced father of 2, and apparently the kind of person who ruins lives when properly motivated. Welcome to my midlife crisis, where instead of buying a Corvette and dating 25-year-olds, I'm destroying a political dynasty and reclaiming my entire life. Trust me, it's way more satisfying than a sports car. Let me tell you about the 2 things Sophia loved more than anything else in this world. And spoiler alert, neither of them was me, which honestly I should have figured out way earlier. But apparently I'm an idiot when it comes to my own life, despite being a genius at dissecting everyone else's. The first thing she loved was luxury handbags. And I'm not talking about your normal, oh, that's a nice purse kind of bags. I'm talking about the kind of bags that cost more than some people's cars. The kind that come in orange boxes with ribbons and have waiting lists longer than the DMV on a Monday morning. Hermes, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, she collected them like some people collect stamps or baseball cards, except each item in her collection could probably fund a small country's education system for a year. Our walk-in closet, which was roughly the size of most people's bedrooms, had an entire wall dedicated to these things, all lined up like little leather trophies celebrating her ability to spend my money in increasingly creative ways. The second thing she loved was attention, and this one was way more dangerous than the handbag obsession, because at least bags just sit there looking expensive. Attention requires an audience, and Sophia needed constant validation like normal people need oxygen. She needed people looking at her, admiring her, telling her she was beautiful and special and amazing. And I'll be honest, I tried to give her that attention for the first few years of our marriage. I really did. I complimented her outfits, showed up to her charity events, played the role of supportive husband. But apparently, I wasn't giving her enough of whatever it was she needed. Or maybe I was just too boring, too focused on work, too much of a regular guy who thought marriage meant partnership instead of perpetual performance art. So she found someone who could give her that attention, someone who looked at her like she was the only person in the room, someone who had abs you could see through his shirt and the intellectual depth of a puddle in a parking lot. Enter Chad Miller, personal trainer, aspiring real estate mogul, and current holder of the title Dumbest Man to Ever Think He Was Smart.
Chad is 32, which already tells you everything you need to know about where Sophia's head was at. She wanted someone younger, someone who made her feel like she wasn't approaching 40. Someone who probably told her she looked like she was still in her 20s, even though everyone with functioning eyeballs could see that ship had sailed. Chad's entire personality can be summed up by his Instagram bio, which, I'm not even joking about this, genuinely read, "Fitness entrepreneur, real estate investor, living my best life." The emoji use alone should have been a criminal offense. But what really killed me was the real estate investor part, because this guy couldn't invest in a winning lottery ticket if someone handed him the numbers. He worked at one of those chain gyms where the membership costs $19 a month and the equipment looks like it was salvaged from a 1980s prison. And his big claim to fame was that he once helped some minor local celebrity lose 20 pounds for a wedding, which apparently qualified him to lecture people about optimizing their lifestyle on social media. Now, Sophia met Chad at, where else, the gym, because apparently that's where midlife crises go to find validation these days. She'd hired him as her personal trainer, which I was actually fine with at first because she'd been complaining about wanting to get in shape, and I figured having a professional helper was better than listening to her talk about starting another diet she'd quit in 3 days. What I didn't anticipate was that personal training would turn into a personal relationship. But honestly, I should have seen it coming the second I met this guy, because he had that specific kind of confidence that only comes from being good-looking enough that people let you get away with being stupid. The first time Chad came to our house, because apparently working out at the gym wasn't good enough, she needed private sessions in our home gym, I watched him walk in wearing pants so tight I could see his religion, a tank top that might as well have been painted on, and enough cologne to fumigate a small apartment building. The cologne was called something ridiculous like fierce or intensity or maybe just lawsuit. I don't remember exactly, but it smelled like someone had bottled the concept of trying too hard and added notes of desperation. He shook my hand with this grip that was trying way too hard to prove something, looked me in the eye with this smile that was probably supposed to be friendly but came off as predatory, and called me boss, like we were suddenly best friends. "Great to meet you, boss," he said, and I remember thinking that nobody who calls you boss in your own house is actually respecting you as a boss. "Your wife's been telling me all about you. Corporate security, right? That's awesome, man. Real Jason Bourne stuff." I wasn't corporate security. I ran a corporate investigation firm, and it was nothing like Jason Bourne. But correcting him would have required him to understand the difference, and I was pretty sure that was asking too much. So I just smiled, said something non-committal, and watched him follow Sophia downstairs to the gym while I mentally calculated how long it would take before this turned into exactly what it eventually turned into. The affair, because let's just call it what it was, started sometime around month 2 of the training sessions, which I know because that's when Sophia suddenly got really interested in business opportunities and started talking about investing in real estate, not just buying a rental property or something normal like that, but becoming Chad's business partner in some vague development project that was definitely going to make them both millionaires and definitely wasn't just an excuse to spend more time together. She started having these business meetings that ran late into the evening, started taking calls in other rooms with the door closed, started being on her phone constantly while sitting right next to me on the couch. And the whole time she's explaining that she's building their portfolio and diversifying their investments, like I'm supposed to believe that she suddenly became a real estate expert by sleeping with a guy who thinks equity is just a fancy word for expensive. Chad, to his credit, actually believed he was a business genius, which was almost endearing in how delusional it was. He'd talk about flipping properties and building wealth and creating passive income streams with the confidence of someone who'd watched 3 YouTube videos and thought he'd earned an MBA. The reality was that he was broke, living in a studio apartment with furniture from IKEA, and not even the good IKEA stuff, the stuff from the ASI section that's probably structurally unsound, and driving a leased BMW that he could barely afford but needed because apparently image is everything when you're trying to convince people you're successful. His idea of a business partnership with Sophia was basically just having her fund everything while he contributed his expertise, which, as far as I could tell, consisted of knowing a guy who knew a guy who sometimes flipped houses. He couldn't spell dumbbell without autocorrect. I know this because I saw a text message where he spelled it dumbbell, which isn't even close. And yet somehow he thought he was qualified to lecture people about building wealth and making smart investments. He wore watches that looked expensive but were actually $40 knockoffs you could buy at the mall, the kind with fake diamonds that fall off if you look at them too hard. And he drove that BMW like it was proof of his success instead of proof of his ability to make bad financial decisions. The really hilarious part, the part that almost made me laugh, except it was my marriage imploding, so it wasn't actually funny, was watching them think they were being sneaky. They thought I didn't notice the late-night texts, the way she'd change her clothes 3 times before going to yoga, the fact that her yoga sessions always seemed to happen at times when the actual yoga studio was closed. They thought deleting their messages meant I couldn't see them. Thought that using his phone instead of hers for the really incriminating stuff meant there was no trail. Thought that booking hotels under his name instead of hers created some kind of plausible deniability. But here's the thing about being married to someone who investigates people for a living. You should probably assume that person knows how to investigate you, too. Every deleted text, every cash withdrawal, every business lunch that showed up on credit card statements, I saw it all. I watched them build their little fantasy world where they were going to run off together and live this amazing life funded by my money and my assets. And the whole time I'm just sitting back thinking, okay, let them cook. Let them think they're getting away with it because every chef eventually burns the kitchen and I'm going to be right here when the smoke alarm goes off.
Chad thought he was Socrates in a tight shirt, some kind of philosopher-entrepreneur who'd figured out the secrets of life and success. In reality, he was just another himbo who'd confused being attractive with being intelligent. And now he was about to learn the hardest lesson of his life. Never get involved in a war between a trained intelligence operative and his wife because you're not a player in that game. You're just collateral damage waiting to happen. So, when I confirmed what I'd suspected for months, that Sophia was sleeping with her discount personal trainer and planning to take me for everything I had, I didn't yell. I didn't confront her, didn't leave passive-aggressive notes around the house, didn't dramatically throw her stuff on the lawn like they do in movies. No, I did something way more effective and infinitely more satisfying. I opened up Excel, created a new spreadsheet with multiple tabs, and started documenting every single thing I could find. Call me boring, call me a nerd, call me whatever you want, but there's something deeply therapeutic about organizing someone's betrayal into neat little rows and columns with color-coded categories and cross-reference data points. I started tracking everything, and I mean everything. Bank statements, going back 3 years, because financial infidelity almost always comes before physical infidelity. People start hiding money before they start hiding themselves. Credit card charges that didn't make sense, like the time she claimed she was at a work conference in Chicago, but her credit card got charged at a hotel in our own city. Or the mysterious cash withdrawals that happened every Tuesday afternoon right before her yoga classes. Location data. Not in a creepy stalker way, but in a my phone plan includes family tracking and she never bothered to turn it off way, which showed me that her charity luncheons were happening at suspiciously hotel-adjacent locations, and her business meetings seemed to take place in the parking lots of establishments that definitely didn't conduct business.
Then there were the charity lunches, which, let me tell you, became my favorite category in the spreadsheet because the sheer audacity of using charity work as a cover for an affair is kind of impressive in its awfulness. Sophia was on the board of like 17 different charitable organizations, mostly because it looked good for her mother's political career and gave her an excuse to buy expensive dresses for fundraising galas. And she leveraged that involvement into the perfect alibi. "Sorry, honey, can't make dinner tonight. I have a foundation board meeting," she'd say, kissing my cheek and smelling like she'd bathed in department store perfume. And then she'd disappear for 4 hours to do absolutely anything except attend a board meeting. I started calling her assistant at these organizations, playing the concerned husband who wanted to send flowers to his wife's office after her long meetings. And you know what I discovered? Half those meetings didn't exist, and the other half ended at least 2 hours before she came home. The late-night business meetings were even better. And by better, I mean more insulting to my intelligence, because apparently Sophia thought that real estate development happens at 10 p.m. on weeknights and requires her to dress like she's going to a nightclub. She'd come home at midnight, smelling like hotel soak, and yes, different hotels have different soap smells. You learn this kind of thing when you're paying attention. With this glow that definitely didn't come from negotiating property contracts. And she'd tell me about how she and Chad had been running numbers and analyzing market trends until late. The only thing they were analyzing was how much of my money they could steal, and the only numbers they were running were probably the room service charges. But the real goldmine, the absolute jackpot of evidence, came from Sophia's laptop. She had this MacBook Air that she guarded like it contained nuclear launch codes. Always closing it when I walked into the room, always taking it with her even when she went to get coffee, always making sure it was password protected with what she probably thought was a clever password. Here's a pro tip for anyone planning to have an affair: don't use your anniversary date as your laptop password, especially when you're cheating on the person you have that anniversary with. It's like announcing "I'm betraying you" with every login. I waited until she was out at one of her fake charity events. This one supposedly about helping underprivileged children, which is ironic considering she was about to make her own children underprivileged by destroying their family, and I sat down with that laptop and went to work. She deleted her messages, cleared her browser history, even emptied her trash folder. And she probably felt really clever about it, like she'd just committed the perfect crime. What she didn't know, what people never seem to understand, is that deleting something doesn't actually delete it. It just tells the computer that it's okay to write over that space eventually. But until that happens, all that data is still sitting right there, just waiting for someone who knows what they're doing to come along and recover it. 3 hours later, armed with some recovery software that's technically legal but feels illegal because of how powerful it is, I had reconstructed her entire digital life for the past year. Every message, every photo, every email, every Google search that she thought had disappeared into the void. All of it sitting in a folder on my external hard drive, organized by date and contact. It was like Christmas morning, except instead of presents, I was unwrapping evidence of my wife's affair, which is significantly less festive but way more useful in divorce proceedings. The messages were honestly kind of pathetic, and I don't mean that in a bitter way. I mean they were objectively pathetic. Lots of "I miss you, baby," and "can't wait to see you tonight," and the kind of lovey-dovey garbage that sounds romantic when you're 14, but just seems sad when you're approaching 40 and betraying your husband. But the real gems were the ones where they talked strategy, where they discussed their plans for after the divorce, how they were going to use my money to fund their new life together. There was one message from Chad that genuinely made me laugh, where he told her, "Once we get your husband's money, we can finally start living the life we deserve." Like he'd somehow earned the right to my assets by doing bicep curls and having abs. My personal favorite was a text from Sophia that said, "Chad, he still thinks I'm at yoga," complete with a crying laughing emoji, like this was the funniest joke in the world. Joke's on you, sweetheart, because yoga doesn't take place at the Ritz-Carlton, and it definitely doesn't take place in room 408, which apparently you two are creatures of habit. I had the hotel receipts, I had the room service charges, I even had the parking garage timestamps showing exactly when she arrived and when she left. And the durations were always the same, about 2.5 hours, which I guess is how long it takes to destroy a 9-year marriage and also order overpriced club sandwiches. But here's where it gets really interesting, where my investigation went from catching a cheating wife to uncovering something way bigger and darker. While I was digging through Sophia's digital life, I stumbled across something that had nothing to do with her affair and everything to do with her family. There was an old PDF file buried in a folder within another folder, like someone had tried to hide it in the digital equivalent of a maze. The file was titled Vance_case_1999_sealed. And the moment I saw that word sealed, my intelligence training kicked in. Because sealed files are sealed for a reason, and that reason is usually that someone powerful wanted something buried. I opened it, and what I found was basically a roadmap to destroying the Vance family dynasty. It was a police report, or rather a police report that had been modified, edited, and essentially rewritten to change the entire narrative of what happened. The original incident was a hit and run from 25 years ago, back when Sophia's mother, Eleanor, was just starting her legal career, and her father, Robert, was running for his first term in the state Senate. Someone had been hit by a car late at night, seriously injured, and the original report had suspect information that pointed toward a vehicle registered to the Vance family. But then the report had been amended, details had been changed, witness statements had been clarified, and eventually the whole thing had just disappeared, sealed away with the kind of legal maneuvering that only money and political connections can buy. The file had everything. The original report, the amended versions showing exactly what had been changed, bank records showing payments to various people involved in the case, and even some handwritten notes that appeared to be from Judge Vance herself, discussing how to manage the narrative and protect the family's future. It was the kind of evidence that ends careers, destroys legacies, and sends people to prison. And it had been sitting on my wife's laptop this entire time, probably because her mother had sent it to her years ago and Sophia had forgotten it existed. So now I had something way better than proof of an affair. I had leverage. The kind of nuclear-level leverage that makes people very nervous and very cooperative. I had evidence that the Vance family, these pillars of the community who built their entire image on law and order and family values, had covered up a serious crime and destroyed evidence to protect their political ambitions. And the best part was that they had no idea I had it. No idea that while they were planning to take my kids and my money, I was sitting on information that could end all of them. I created a new tab in my spreadsheet, labeled it Insurance Policy, and started organizing this new treasure trove of career-ending documentation. Then I sat back, looked at my work, and realized that Sophia and her family had made a critical mistake. They brought a knife to a gunfight, and I brought an entire arsenal. Checkmate was coming. They just didn't know it yet. Once I had all my evidence compiled, organized, and safely backed up in about 17 different locations, because I'm paranoid like that, I did something that probably confused the hell out of Sophia. I became the perfect husband. Not in a creepy, trying too hard way that would have been obvious, but in a subtle, natural way that made her think maybe her guilt was finally working on me. Maybe I was sensing something was wrong and trying to fix our marriage before it completely fell apart. Little did she know that I wasn't trying to save anything. I was just giving her enough rope to hang herself with. And apparently, I'm the kind of petty that enjoys watching people tie their own nooses. I started acting normal. And by normal, I mean maybe too normal, like suspiciously normal. The kind of normal where you're so aggressively fine with everything that it almost circles back around to being weird. I'd wake up early and make her coffee exactly the way she liked it, with that overpriced oat milk that costs more than regular milk for no reason except marketing. I'd kiss her cheek when she left for her meetings, tell her to have a good day, and ask about her work when she came home smelling like hotel soap and lies. I'd smile and nod when she talked about Chad's amazing real estate insights, even though listening to her repeat his nonsense was like getting a root canal performed by someone who learned dentistry from YouTube. On our anniversary, which was particularly hilarious timing considering she was actively planning to divorce me, I took her to that fancy restaurant she loved, the one where appetizers cost $40 and you leave hungry because they believe in portion control or whatever excuse rich people use for serving tiny food on giant plates. I bought her flowers, told her she looked beautiful, and played the role of devoted husband so convincingly that I could see the guilt flickering across her face every time she looked at me. She actually teared up at one point, and I remember thinking, yeah, cry it out now, because you're going to be crying a lot more later when this all comes crashing down. But the real Oscar-worthy performance came when I upgraded her car. She'd been complaining about her Mercedes for months, saying it was getting old. It was 3 years old, which in normal people world means it's basically brand new. But in Sophia's world, anything over 2 years old is basically a fossil. So I surprised her with a brand new one. Same model, but the latest year with all the bells and whistles she wanted. Cost me about 80 grand, which sounds insane, and it was insane. But here's the thing. I knew that in a few months when the divorce went through, that car was going to be mine anyway. And watching her face light up, thinking she'd manipulated me into buying it, was worth every penny just for the dramatic irony. She thought guilt was working. She thought that on some subconscious level I knew something was wrong and I was overcompensating by throwing money and attention at the problem. She'd hug me and say things like, "I don't deserve you," while Chad was probably waiting in some hotel room wondering why she was running late, and I'd just smile and think, "You're absolutely right. You don't deserve me, but not in the way you think." The whole thing was like performing in a play where only I knew the actual ending and everyone else was just improvising their way toward their own doom. Meanwhile, behind the scenes of my perfect husband act, I was uncovering more financial dirt than I ever expected. I started going through our joint accounts with the kind of attention to detail that would make forensic accountants jealous. And what I found was basically a masterclass in financial infidelity. Sophia had been moving money around like she was training for the white-collar crime Olympics, making transfers that she thought were small enough that I wouldn't notice, but that added up to something pretty significant when you put them all together. The really damning part was that she'd opened a joint account with Chad, which is such a monumentally stupid thing to do when you're planning to divorce your husband that I almost felt bad for her. Almost. This account had both their names on it, and over the past year, she'd transferred a total of $310,000 into it. $310,000? That's not hiding a little money for an emergency fund money. That's planning to run away and start a new life money. Every time she said she was buying something for the house, or donating to charity, or investing in her business ventures, a chunk of that money was actually going into this secret account that she thought I'd never find. The cherry on top of this financial disaster Sunday was that Chad had used his birthday as the password for their online banking. I'm not even kidding. His birthday, the same birthday that he posted about on Instagram every year with inspirational quotes about getting older and wiser, which was ironic considering he was getting older, but definitely not wiser. This is the same guy who once told me, and I quote, "You can't get viruses on iPhones, bro. That's just not how it works," which is so confidently wrong that it wraps back around to being almost impressive. If confidence was intelligence, Chad would be Einstein. But unfortunately for him, confidence is just confidence, and stupid is still stupid. I had access to everything now. Their messages about what they do with the money, their plans for buying a house together somewhere warm like Florida or California where they could start fresh. Chad's detailed notes about how they'd invest my money into his business ventures, which appeared to consist of ideas he'd gotten from watching Flip or Flop reruns. There were spreadsheets, His spreadsheets, not mine, which was cute, showing projected returns on investments that didn't exist, business plans for companies that would never happen, and a budget for their future life together that was based on the assumption that they'd successfully take me for everything and I'd just roll over and let it happen. But here's where things got really interesting, where my investigation took a turn from catching an affair to uncovering a conspiracy. I found another sealed file, this one not on Sophia's laptop, but in her mother's email correspondence that Sophia had forwarded to herself years ago and forgotten about. This was the full story of that hit-and-run case from 1999, and it was so much worse than the initial file I'd found. The original police report that I'd seen before was just the tip of the iceberg. This email chain showed the entire cover-up in detail, like a how-to guide for destroying evidence and manipulating the legal system. Judge Eleanor Vance, back when she was just lawyer Eleanor Vance, had orchestrated the whole thing. The victim of the hit-and-run had been a college student walking home from a late-night study session, got hit by a car that fled the scene, ended up with serious injuries and permanent disability. The car was registered to the Vance family, and initial witness statements suggested it had been driven by someone matching Robert Vance's description, though the witnesses weren't entirely certain because it was dark and they'd only seen the vehicle for a few seconds.
But instead of letting the investigation proceed normally, the Vance family had gone into full damage control mode. They'd hired the most expensive lawyers they could find, the kind that specialize in making problems disappear for wealthy clients. Money had changed hands. Payments to witnesses who suddenly remembered things differently. Payments to police officers who lost certain pieces of evidence. Payments to the victim's family to settle quietly and seal all the records. The email chain showed Eleanor discussing strategy with Robert, talking about how they needed to protect his political future, how this one mistake couldn't be allowed to derail everything they'd worked for. The really damning part was a message from Eleanor to Robert that said, "The girl will be fine eventually, and even if she isn't, we've paid her family enough that they won't complain. Your career is more important than some random student's medical bills." The casual cruelty of it, the cold calculation that someone's lifelong disability was less important than a political career, was the kind of thing that ends dynasties when it goes public. I sat there reading these emails, these detailed confessions of corruption and obstruction of justice, and I realized I wasn't just holding evidence of an affair anymore. I was holding evidence of actual crimes, serious crimes, the kind that come with prison sentences and destroyed legacies. And the Vance family had no idea this evidence existed outside their control, had no idea that their daughter had accidentally kept copies of everything, had no idea that those copies were now in the hands of the son-in-law they were about to betray. So I created new folders, made more backups, organized everything with timestamps and cross-references, and basically built a legal nuclear bomb that I could detonate whenever I wanted. The beauty of it was that I didn't even have to do anything illegal myself. I just had to be ready to hand over evidence of their illegal activities to the right people at the right time. I wasn't breaking the law. I was just really good at finding out when other people had broken it. And through all of this, I kept playing the perfect husband. I smiled at family dinners with the Vances, made small talk with Senator Robert about his upcoming campaign, complimented Judge Eleanor on her latest ruling, and the whole time I'm sitting there knowing that I could destroy all of them whenever I wanted. It was like playing poker with a royal flush while everyone else was bluffing with garbage hands. And the only hard part was not smiling too much and giving away that I'd already won. Sophia would come home from her affairs and I'd ask her about her day. Chad would text her in front of me and I'd pretend not to notice. Her parents would lecture me about responsibility and family values and I'd nod along like I gave a damn about their opinions. The whole thing was performance art, and I was giving the performance of my life, letting them all dig themselves deeper while I just waited for the perfect moment to pull the trigger on everything I'd built.
So, here we are, back to where this whole story started. My 45th birthday, which was shaping up to be either the worst day of my life or the best day of my life, depending on how you looked at it. And honestly, I was leaning toward best because I'm the kind of person who finds satisfaction in well-executed revenge. The morning started normal enough, or at least as normal as any day can be when you know your wife is about to try to destroy your life. I woke up, made myself coffee because Sophia had mysteriously decided not to make me birthday breakfast, subtle, really subtle, and headed into the office like it was any other Wednesday. Except this Wednesday came with the knowledge that I was about to get legally ambushed, and I was more prepared for it than a doomsday prepper with a bunker full of canned goods. My office was decorated, which was actually kind of sweet. Emily, my assistant, who's basically the only person in my life who isn't actively trying to screw me over, had put up some balloons and one of those banner things that says "Happy Birthday" in letters that are always slightly crooked no matter how carefully you hang them. She brought in donuts from that fancy place downtown where they charge $6 per donut because apparently adding sprinkles and calling something artisanal multiplies the price by 4. There was a card signed by everyone in the office, and for a brief moment I felt kind of bad that they were all being nice to me on the same day my personal life was about to explode like a fireworks factory. But then I remembered that I was about to win the biggest case of my career, my own divorce, and I felt better. The ambush came around 10:30 in the morning, right after I'd finished a conference call with a client who was worried about data breaches, which was ironic timing considering I was about to experience a marriage breach. Lawrence Trent walked into my office like he owned the place, wearing that cheap suit that I'd already mentally cataloged during our first encounter, and carrying his briefcase with the kind of self-important swagger that only lawyers and people who peaked in high school can pull off. He had this smile on his face, this smug little smirk that said he thought he was about to ruin my entire existence. And I could tell he'd been looking forward to this moment, probably practicing his lines in the mirror like some kind of discount villain from a legal drama that got canceled after one season. "Mr. Sterling," he said, and there was that theatrical quality again, like he was announcing something at an award show. "Happy birthday. I hope you're having a good morning because I'm about to make your afternoon considerably more complicated." I gestured to the chair across from my desk, the one I usually reserve for clients who are about to confess to corporate espionage, and watched him sit down with way too much confidence for someone wearing a tie that looked like it had been attacked by a printer running low on ink. "Please, sit. Can I get you something? Coffee? Water? A better suit?" He didn't appreciate the joke, which was fine because it wasn't really for him. It was for me. Flourish, like he was about to reveal the Holy Grail instead of just some paperwork, and pulled out a stack of documents that was honestly impressive in its thickness. This wasn't just divorce papers. This was a full legal assault, the kind of filing that probably took weeks to prepare and cost Sophia a fortune in legal fees. Which was funny because the money she was using to pay for her divorce lawyer was technically our money, which meant I was partially funding my own legal destruction, which is the kind of irony that you can't make up. "Your wife, Sophia Vance Sterling, is filing for divorce," he announced, and I swear he paused for effect, waiting for me to react. When I didn't, when I just sat there with my hands folded on my desk, looking mildly interested like he was telling me about the weather, I could see the confusion start to flicker across his face. This wasn't going how he'd planned. "She's seeking full custody of both minor children, Liam and Olivia, citing your excessive work hours and emotional unavailability as reasons you're an unfit parent." That one stung a little, I'll admit, because my kids are the one thing in this whole mess that actually matters to me. But I kept my face neutral because showing emotion was exactly what he wanted. Let him think I didn't care. Let him underestimate me. That's when people make mistakes. She's also requesting 70% of sterling risk consulting, he continued, clearly warming up to his role now, getting into the rhythm of his prepared speech. Given that the business was built during your marriage, she's entitled to significant ownership. And given her contributions to your success, hosting clients, managing your social calendar, representing the family at various events, we believe 70% is more than fair. I almost laughed at that one. 70% for hosting dinner parties and showing up to galas in expensive dresses? The audacity was actually kind of impressive, like asking for the moon and expecting someone to just hand it over because you asked nicely, or, in this case, because you hired a lawyer who could ask with official-looking paperwork. Additionally, and this is where Lawrence really leaned into his role, probably the high point of his entire legal career, she's requesting the primary residence, both vehicles registered in your name, and a monthly spousal support payment of $25,000 for the next 10 years, which factors in the lifestyle she's become accustomed to and her limited earning potential due to focusing on family and charitable work during your marriage. He slid the documents across my desk like he was presenting evidence at a murder trial, and I glanced down at them without really reading them because I'd already known everything he was going to say. I'd seen drafts of these papers weeks ago when I'd hacked into her lawyer's email, which sounds illegal but is actually just creative information gathering according to my own moral compass, and I'd been preparing my response ever since.
Impressive, I said, leaning back in my chair with what I hoped looked like casual indifference. You rehearsed that whole speech, or does arrogance just come naturally to you? His smile faltered for a second, and I could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to figure out if I was joking, or if I was serious, or if maybe I was having some kind of breakdown that manifested as inappropriate humor. Mr. Sterling, I don't think you understand the seriousness of this situation. Your wife has a very strong case, and if you contest this, it's going to get ugly for you. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said, opening my desk drawer, the same drawer where I'd prepared my counter-ambush, and pulling out that beautiful sealed envelope that I'd been looking forward to delivering for weeks now. It was heavier than his envelope, which was poetic in a way because what I was about to do to his client was definitely heavier than what she was trying to do to me. But I don't think you understand, Lawrence. Can I call you Lawrence? Or do you prefer Larry? You look like a Larry. It's Mr. Trent, he said, and now he was getting annoyed, which was exactly where I wanted him. Sure, Mr. Trent. I slid the envelope across the desk, mirroring his earlier dramatic gesture. I need you to deliver this to your client today, as soon as possible. Actually, tell her it's my birthday present to her, and she should open it somewhere private, preferably with her parents present, because they're going to want to be there for what comes next. He picked up the envelope like it might explode, which in a metaphorical sense it absolutely was going to, and turned it over in his hands with this confused expression that suggested his brain was working overtime trying to figure out what was happening. What is this? Just some light reading, I said, taking a sip of my now cold coffee, because I was committed to the casual act, even though my heart was racing with adrenaline. Family history, old stories, that kind of thing. You know how families are. Everyone has secrets they'd rather keep buried. Unfortunately for your client and her family, I'm really good at digging things up. It's literally my job. Lawrence stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him trying to decide if this was a bluff, if I was just trying to intimidate him with vague threats and mysterious envelopes, or if I actually had something real. The thing about lawyers like Lawrence is that they're used to dealing with emotional, reactive people who make threats they can't back up. So, when they encounter someone who's calm and prepared, it throws them off their game. Mr. Sterling, if you think you can intimidate my client with...
"I'm not intimidating anyone," I interrupted, and my voice was pleasant, almost cheerful. "I'm just providing information, public service, really. Your client and her family are very concerned about their reputation, their legacy, all that political dynasty stuff. And I thought they should know that someone has access to certain historical documents that might be of interest to, say, journalists or federal investigators, or both." Now he looked worried, actually worried, and I could see the exact moment when he realized that maybe he'd walked into something bigger than a standard divorce case with a wealthy couple fighting over assets. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about something that could end careers and destroy families. And he was holding the evidence in his hands without even knowing what it was. "Deliver the envelope, Larry," I said, standing up to signal that our meeting was over. "And tell your client that if she wants to have a conversation about reasonable settlement terms, instead of trying to take me for everything, my door is open. But if she wants to play hardball, if she wants to make this ugly, then that envelope is just the opening move. I've got a whole chess game planned out. And trust me, she doesn't want to see the endgame." He left looking like he'd just been punched in the stomach, clutching that envelope like it was radioactive material, and I watched him walk out of my office with the kind of satisfaction that only comes from knowing you've just launched a counterattack that's gonna hit like a freight train. I sat back down, finished my cold coffee, and checked my watch. Based on my calculations, accounting for drive time and the time it would take Sophia to actually open the envelope and read the contents, I estimated I had about 3 to 4 hours before my phone started exploding with panicked calls from the Vance family. I was wrong. It only took 2.5 hours. And when those calls started coming in, when I saw Sophia's name flash across my screen, followed by her mother's number and then her father's, I let them all go to voicemail for the first round, because making powerful people wait is its own kind of satisfaction. By 6 p.m., I had 17 missed calls, 9 voicemails, and about 30 text messages, ranging from angry to desperate to straight-up begging. And that's when I finally poured myself that drink, put my feet up on my desk, and called back. The first call came in at exactly 3:47 p.m., which was actually earlier than I predicted, meaning either Sophia was a faster reader than I gave her credit for, or she'd taken one look at the documents and immediately understood just how screwed she was. I was in the middle of a meeting with a potential client, explaining how we could help track down whoever was leaking their product designs to competitors, when my phone started vibrating on my desk with that insistent buzz that means someone really, really needs to talk to you right now. I glanced down, saw Sophia Mobile flash across the screen, and silenced it with the kind of casual dismissal that probably would have enraged her if she'd been there to see it. The client didn't notice, or if he did, he was polite enough not to mention it, and we continued discussing contract terms while my phone kept lighting up like a slot machine hitting jackpot. By the time the meeting ended 45 minutes later, I had 8 missed calls from Sophia, 3 from a number I didn't recognize but assumed was her trying to outsmart my screening by calling from somewhere else, and 2 from her mother's cell phone. The voicemails were piling up in my inbox like angry little time bombs waiting to explode. And I have to admit, I was really looking forward to listening to them, because there's something deeply satisfying about hearing powerful people lose their composure. But I didn't listen to them yet, because the game was just getting started, and I wanted to let them marinate in their panic for a little while longer. Let them wonder if I was ignoring them, or if I just hadn't seen the calls. Let their imaginations run wild with worst-case scenarios. I made myself another coffee, the good stuff from the espresso machine in the break room, not the garbage from the office pot that tastes like it was brewed through an old gym sock, and settled back into my office to do some actual work. One of the benefits of running your own company is that you can pretty much set your own schedule. And if that schedule involves letting your soon-to-be ex-wife and her corrupt family sweat it out for a few hours while you catch up on emails, well, that's just good time management. Around 5:30, my assistant Emily knocked on my door with that look she gets when she knows something's up but is too professional to ask about it directly. "Mr. Sterling, you've had several calls from your wife," she said, and I could tell she was trying to phrase it in a way that didn't sound judgmental, but also communicated that maybe I should probably call back because the calls were getting increasingly frantic. She said it was urgent, family emergency urgent. "Thanks, Emily," I said, giving her my best reassuring smile. "It's fine, just some personal stuff we're working through. Nothing to worry about." She nodded and left, but I could see the concern in her eyes. Because Emily's worked for me for 5 years, and she's developed this sixth sense about when things are going sideways in my personal life, which is actually pretty often, considering my personal life has been a disaster for the past few years. The difference was that this time, this particular disaster was entirely under my control and going exactly according to plan.
At 6 p.m. sharp, I finally decided it was time to start returning calls. I poured myself 2 fingers of whiskey from the bottle I keep in my desk, 18-year-old single malt that costs more than most people's car payments, because if you're going to destroy your wife's family dynasty, you might as well do it with class, and dialed Sophia's number. She picked up before the first ring finished, which told me she'd been sitting there with her phone in her hand, staring at it like it might spontaneously combust. "Daniel," she said, and her voice was already shaking, already on the edge of tears or rage or both. "What did you do? What the hell did you do?" I took a slow sip of whiskey, let it burn down my throat, and said in the most casual voice I could manage, "Technically, nothing illegal. I just provided some historical documentation that I thought you and your family might want to review. Happy birthday to me, by the way. Thanks for asking." "This isn't funny," she said, and now she was definitely crying. I could hear it in the way her voice was breaking. "You can't do this. You can't just... Daniel, please, we need to talk about this." "Oh, now you want to talk," I said, and I couldn't keep the sarcasm out of my voice even if I'd wanted to. "That's interesting. This morning you wanted to take my kids, my business, and basically everything I've ever worked for, but now suddenly we need to have a conversation. What changed, Sophia? Did you finally read the part about the hit-and-run cover-up? Or was it the financial records showing the bribes? I'm curious which part upset you most." There was silence on the other end, just breathing and what sounded like someone else in the background. Probably her mother or father, maybe both, all huddled around speakerphone having a crisis meeting in whatever room they thought was safe from listening devices. Little did they know that I didn't need listening devices. They documented their own crimes so thoroughly that I just had to organize the evidence. "We can work this out," she finally said, and her voice had shifted from panic to calculating, which meant she was trying to negotiate now, trying to find an angle that would make this go away. "Whatever you want, we can figure something out. Just please don't—" "Don't what?" I interrupted. "Don't tell the truth? Don't share historical facts with people who might be interested in them? Sophia, I'm not doing anything yet. I'm just sitting here in my office drinking expensive whiskey on my birthday, thinking about my options." "Daniel, please." I hung up. Not in an angry slam-the-phone-down way, just a simple press of the end call button. Because sometimes the most devastating thing you can do is just stop talking. Let them sit with that silence. Let them wonder what I'm planning. Let them panic about all the ways this could blow up in their faces. The second call came 3 minutes later, and this time it was Judge Eleanor Vance herself, using her "I'm a serious authority figure" voice that probably works great in courtrooms but wasn't going to work on me. I let it ring 4 times before answering, just to be petty about it. "Daniel," she said, skipping all the pleasantries and going straight to business. "How did you find those files? They were sealed, legally sealed. You had no right to access them." "I read," I said simply. "You should try it sometime. Very educational. You learn all sorts of interesting things, like how political families sometimes cover up serious crimes to protect their careers. Real page-turner material. Those files are protected." "Were protected," I corrected, past tense. See, the thing about digital files is that they're really hard to actually destroy.
You can seal them legally, you can hide them, you can pretend they don't exist. But somewhere, somehow, there's always a copy floating around. In this case, that copy ended up on your daughter's laptop, and she, very helpfully, forwarded it to herself via email years ago, probably for insurance purposes. Smart move, actually. Just unfortunate for you that I'm married to her and I know how to recover deleted files. I could practically hear her blood pressure spiking through the phone. You can't use those files. They're inadmissible. They're protected by attorney-client privilege. In court, maybe, I said, swirling my whiskey and enjoying the way the light caught it. But I'm not planning to take you to court, Eleanor. I'm planning to take you to the court of public opinion, which has much looser rules about admissibility. CNN would have a field day with this story. Prominent judge and senator covered up hit and run 25 years ago. Bribed witnesses, falsified police reports. I bet they could stretch that into a week-long special report. Maybe get one of those investigative journalism awards. Very prestigious. You wouldn't dare, she said. But her voice was wavering now, the authority figure mask slipping to reveal the scared woman underneath. Wouldn't I? I asked. See, here's the thing. This morning, your daughter tried to take my children away from me. She tried to destroy my business, take my assets, and basically ruin my life over an affair with a personal trainer who can't spell dumbbell, which is actually kind of impressive in how stupid it is. So yeah, I would absolutely dare. I would dare with enthusiasm and a smile on my face. The third call came an hour later, after I'd let both Sophia and her mother stew in their panic for a while. And this time, it was Senator Robert Vance himself, using his carefully cultivated, man-of-the-people voice that he probably practiced in the mirror before campaign speeches. He tried the friendly approach first, calling me son, like we were buddies having a casual chat instead of enemies in the middle of a war. Daniel, son, I think there's been a misunderstanding here, he started, and I could picture him in his study, probably wearing one of those cardigan sweaters that politicians wear when they want to look relatable and trustworthy. Whatever my daughter did, whatever mistakes were made, I'm sure we can work this out like reasonable people. Family shouldn't fight like this. We're not family, Robert, I said, deliberately using his first name instead of Senator because I knew it would annoy him. We were family when it was convenient for you, when you could use me for photo ops and claim that your daughter married a successful businessman. But the moment Sophia decided to trade me in for a newer model, the moment you all decided to destroy me, that family connection ended. You made this personal, so don't act surprised when I respond personally. You don't want to make enemies in Washington, son, he said, and now the friendly mask was slipping, revealing the politician underneath who was used to getting his way through implied threats. I have friends in very high places. And I have evidence of multiple felonies that you committed, I interrupted. So, let's talk about who has more leverage here. Your friends in high places? They'll abandon you the second this story breaks. Because politicians are like rats on a sinking ship. They only stick around when things are good. The moment you become a liability, the moment your scandal threatens to splash back on them, they'll be writing press releases about how they barely knew you. There was a long silence, and I could hear him breathing heavily, probably trying to control his anger. Senator Robert Vance was not used to being talked to like this, was not used to someone treating him like he was anything other than powerful and important. And the cognitive dissonance was probably giving him a headache. "What do you want?" he finally asked, and his voice was flat now, defeated, like a poker player who just realized he was holding nothing while the other guy had a royal flush. "Oh, I already have, Senator," I said, finishing my whiskey in one satisfying gulp. "You're just cheaper to destroy." I hung up on him too, because apparently I was in a hanging up on people mood, and sat back in my chair, feeling more satisfied than I had in years. My phone kept buzzing with incoming calls and texts, a never-ending stream of panic and desperation from the Vance family, as they slowly realized that they'd declared war on the wrong person. Lawrence Trent, Sophia's lawyer, called twice, trying to negotiate and discuss settlement options, which was lawyer speak for, "Please don't destroy my client because that would also destroy my reputation."
By 8 p.m., I had 23 missed calls, 14 voicemails, and 47 text messages ranging from threats to pleas to offers of various settlements that got progressively more desperate as the evening went on. I didn't respond to any of them. I just sat there, watching the city lights come on, and smiled. The game was over. I'd won. Within 48 hours of my birthday ambush, the entire Vance family empire started crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide, and honestly, it was beautiful to watch, in that schadenfreude kind of way, where you know you probably shouldn't enjoy someone else's misery, but you absolutely do anyway. Judge Eleanor Vance announced her retirement for health reasons on Thursday morning, which everyone with half a brain knew was code for, "I'm getting out before the scandal breaks." And by Thursday afternoon, Senator Robert Vance had canceled his re-election campaign with some vague statement about spending more time with family that fooled absolutely nobody in political circles. Chad, my wife's brilliant personal trainer boyfriend, deleted his entire Instagram account sometime around midnight on Wednesday, which was honestly the biggest tragedy of this whole situation because I'd been really enjoying watching his motivational quotes and shirtless selfies, knowing that his whole life was about to implode. The guy went from posting daily inspiration about living your best life to completely disappearing from social media, probably because he'd finally figured out that being the other man in a divorce case involving political corruption and federal crimes wasn't actually the flex he thought it was. The divorce settlement was finalized a month later. It was surprisingly reasonable. Sophia got the house, which was fine because I never liked that mausoleum anyway. She got one of the cars and a modest one-time settlement that was a fraction of what she'd originally demanded. Most importantly, I got 50-50 custody of Liam and Olivia with a very clear and legally binding parenting plan that prevented her from moving them out of state or bad-mouthing me to them. Her lawyer, Lawrence, was remarkably cooperative throughout the entire process, probably because he'd seen the evidence and understood that his client had no leverage left. As for the sealed files on the Vance family's past, they're currently sitting in a secure vault, along with copies in several other very safe locations. I have no immediate plans to release them. They've served their purpose. They're my insurance policy, ensuring that the Vance family remains permanently neutralized. Every now and then, around the holidays, I get a carefully worded, perfectly polite text from Robert or Eleanor, checking in, making sure I'm doing well. They know, and I know that they know. That's enough. Now I spend my evenings doing something I never thought I'd get to do again, being an actual dad, instead of just the guy who pays for stuff and gets ignored. Liam and Olivia are back living with me full-time, and we've developed this routine where I make pancakes every Saturday morning while they tell me about their week. And honestly, it's the most normal thing in my life, and I love it more than any business deal I've ever closed. Liam's reading college-level physics books now and asking me questions I have to Google to answer. And Olivia started calling me the best dad ever, which I'm pretty sure she says to get extra dessert, but I'll take it anyway. Do I regret anything? Only that I didn't install security cameras sooner, because I would have paid good money to watch Chad try to explain to Sophia why his real estate expertise somehow required them to meet exclusively in hotel rooms with room service. That conversation probably would have been comedy gold, the kind of awkward, fumbling explanation that would make a great YouTube compilation if anyone had filmed it.